So basically, what I want to discuss is paranormal activities, and that's a pretty broad category. And basically, what it covers is things that invoke supernatural explanations rather than natural ones, and they're pretty much outside of what we would typically expect to see in the natural world. And so, because of this, they are things that really are outside of the purview of the scientific method and can't be tested by science because they can't be reproduced under controlled conditions. Um, so some things like this is includes things, but isn't limited to things like extrasensory perception, like ESP, spiritualism, psychokinesis, levitation, numerology, things of that nature that are probably familiar to people. Um, yeah, I don't. Apparently, my camera's not working, but anyways, maybe it'll pop up. But you can hear me, and that's what's important, I guess. So, there's several examples of famous individuals who claim like psychic powers and things like that people might have known of. One really famous example of this is Sylvia Browne, that people probably know. She claimed to be a psychic or a medium, and she appeared frequently on like Montel Williams or Larry King's show. And she's made these claims such as like she knows conditions of heaven. She knows that heaven exists, and she claims that like heaven is always a constant 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and that it exists 3 feet off of ground level, in our reality, but that it exists at a quote unquote higher vibrational level than the rest of reality or perceived reality by most people, which again is kind of a constant theme here that was brought up a little bit earlier about these vibrational levels. That's like a constant theme that we hear about with these claims, these kind of pseudoscientific claims and things. She also said things like there's no insects in heaven unless you want there to be insects in heaven, and that like pets can go to heaven, but that's a fairly common one that people try to use. Even the Pope used that recently to try to console a young boy whose pet had died. She also claimed to like be able to talk to angels, and she said that she had a spirit guide named Francine that would give her information on like her past lives and things. So and basically besides being generally sketchy all around with these claims and not having any evidence for them, she infamously told the parents of a couple children who were missing that they were deceased, that they were no longer alive. This was Sean Hornbeck and Amanda Berry. She told their parents that they were no longer alive, and in fact, they eventually were discovered later to be very much alive. So not only does that prove her, quote unquote abilities demonstrably false, but it just goes to show how, belief in this kind of stuff can really be harmful. It's not just fun and games. It's not just like, oh, I want to believe it because maybe it's true. I mean, this is just flat out harmful. I mean, these parents might have literally lost all hope or stopped looking for their children because they were told by this woman that they were dead. And, depending on what kind of stock they put into her opinion, they could have altered, the way they went about going about things. So, and also she predicted that she would die at age 88 and actually died at age 77. So, there's kind of the kicker with her. Another one was John Edward. I'm sure people are familiar with. He had his own show. He was like a psychic or a medium again, and he had that show called Crossing Over. And basically, he would claim to speak to like dead relatives of people and communicate information back to them. So he would go around the studio audience and ask them these questions. And a lot of the time, it's typical with this type of people, like even like Benny Hinn and similar charlatans of this nature. They kind of have information that they've gotten somehow beforehand, either through a survey or from family members or whatever the case may be. So they already know something about the people that they're going to be talking to, and then they kind of lead them with their questioning, or they ask really vague general questions to lead them along, to kind of pull information out of them, and then as soon as they get a hit, they can follow up on that lead and kind of go with that. And then anytime they're kind of not exactly right, they can just brush it off and then go another route or direction with it, pretty much in stride. But he also faced a lot of criticism because he would tape these long, like 8-hour segments for these shows, and like people who actually went and attended the tapings would say, oh, well, they edited out all the stuff that he got wrong for the most part. So basically what you see on TV is just him seeming to get things right. So, not only was it editing, but he also uses what's called hot and cold reading, which, is kind of, you kind of throw out these general questions and then you can get these responses. And depending on the responses that people give you, where you want to go. So, people like this, they definitely have a skill. It takes personal skills. It takes, definitely a skill. I mean, nothing that's actually supernatural, nothing that's actually founded with any evidence, but I mean, it is a skill that you have to be able to do this for sure. And we brought up James Randi a little earlier, and he certainly has. He's if you haven't heard of James Randi, I'll call him a debunker, but I know he doesn't like using that term specifically, but I can't think offhand of what he prefers to go by. But he's been doing this for 40 or 50 years, where he challenges people. He's gone on, like, he used to go on like the Johnny Carson show, and he used to go on challenge these different people who were making these different supernatural claims, and challenge them to reproduce it, or he would understand how they were doing things, and then he would take away that ability from them and say, all right, go ahead and do it. Or he puts out all these different challenges, and nobody can fulfill them. So he's definitely one of the most amazing people out there who kind of goes after these types of people. Lastly, I just kind of wanted to discuss numerology. That's another thing. So numerology is basically the idea that numbers have like a special significance to specific times or events, maybe like important to people or events in history. And as long as being atheist and everything, a couple notable examples from like Hebrew culture are Aeolus growing devil horns out of his head, apparently. But the number 4 and the number 3 in Hebrew culture were considered quote unquote holy. So when you add those together, what do you get? 7. So 7's kind of another holy number. That's why we have 7 days of creation, for example. And another example in Hebrew culture was the number 40. The number 40 was kind of a general term for like a lot of something. Like today we might say, oh, there was hundreds, there was thousands, just as a general sense of, there was a lot of something. So for them, 40, for whatever reason, was, a really large number. So you can see that when they're describing the Great Flood, 40 days and nights, or, the number of children killed for mocking Isaiah, again, it's 40. They're just kind of throwing out that number like, oh, yeah, it was a whole lot. So, but, overall, basically, numbers are just human inventions. They're arbitrary. There's no special meaning to them. They're also highly malleable, and they can be manipulated really easy. So you can make them kind of say whatever you want, or, give people kind of a confirmation bias to make it seem like there's something behind these numbers that are significant. If you remember, anybody remembers after 9/11 happened, there was a lot of that stuff going around, like, oh, if you add 9 + 1 + 1, or you multiply this and that and the other, and all these supposed hidden meanings behind 9/11, when really it's just playing around with numbers. Also, there was that movie, I think it was called The Number 23, that had Jim Carrey in it, that was kind of centered around this whole idea of numerology. And if anybody's seen that movie, that you can just kind of attach meaning to really any numbers that you want to. So I think that about wraps it up for like a couple examples of paranormal activity. But this obviously is a broad category. Can also like dowsing, like Dieter Lucan was talking about earlier, where people claim to like find water or whatever using these sticks. Also things like ghosts. We all know that, like Bigfoot, Yetis, chupacabras, all that kind of stuff. And sadly enough, most of these things have their own like niche followings and like TV shows and all that kind of stuff, which is unfortunate because of course they present them all as being like real and actually credible, when we all, informed people know that they're really not. But unfortunately, there's been many studies done, including one I think out of Baylor University, and I think it was in 2006, that kind of showed that most people actually have some kind of belief in the paranormal. So even if, obviously most religious things are paranormal, like heaven, gods, things of that, spirituality, things of that nature, but it can go beyond that, it can go outside of religion, and unfortunately a lot of people, I don't know what the exact percentage is of people that believe in supernatural, but it's higher than people that just believe in religion, unfortunately. And so that's kind of why we're tackling the subject. We got to kind of debunk these things and get some real information out there and just address them for the pseudoscience that they are. So